This episode of the KrakCast is brought to you by our friends at BigDoor24.pl. It's a new free service dedicated to helping expats to rent or buy a property and earn cash back on successful mortgage applications. BigDoor24.pl also has lots of tips and advice on renting and buying in Poland, so make sure you check them out and use the special promo code KrakCast to get a great cash back offer. And now, on with the show. So they say that this week in Krakow we have the cleanest air we've had in 3 years, guys.
Gulping it in, Jonas.
Do you feel it? Have you noticed a difference?
It's been very, very windy. I'm sure there's no correlation.
Well, that's the funny thing. I mean, the articles that I saw in the press were talking about the reduction in various laws and regulations governing burning garbage in cars and whatnot. Yeah, it's the wind. We've had crazy wind for like a week, right?
Yeah.
That's got to be it. Have you felt the difference, though, Dave? Have you stepped outside and breathed deep?
I'm from a genuinely windy part of the world, so this little...
Genuinely windy person.
Yeah, but no, I mean, where I'm from, the wind hits the Dublin Mountains, whips back down, and now it blow you sideways off the road, so I don't consider this windy. And as I've told you before, John, the smog issue is still a problem because we can't order wind.
Yeah, but we're coming out of the smog season. Things are warming up, so people are forgetting about smog. So I think we'll return to that in, October, November?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, this is the news, guys. The news. What did I say? The KrakCast news. Oh, let me start over. This is the KrakCast news, and thanks for joining us once again.
I know I've been drinking, but have you been drinking?
Let's jump right into it.
We record this on a Sunday.
This week, on this coming Tuesday, actually, we're recording this on a Sunday. This coming Tuesday is the 20th anniversary of Poland joining NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Kind of a big deal, guys, central to Poland's kind of security situation in Europe, geopolitical stuff. What can we say about the first 20 years in NATO and NATO generally?
It was the first big finger to Putin, really, wasn't it, after he took over things?
It was long in motion before Putin came to...
Well, yeah. Well, no, good for Poland. They kind of, they fight bravely, fiercely, and they contribute their fair share.
Well, that's the real point, Josh, the engagement with the actual organisation, not joining it and then undermining it by being a shit member of it, I mean, they joined alongside, I believe, the Czech Republic and Hungary back in 99 in March. And, they've really engaged with it. Poland hosts a lot of the real hardware that NATO has stationed on Central Europe, and they're keen to have more. I've always seen it as... the Brzezinski way of looking at things, that the collapse of the Soviet Union was a temporary gain, that we had to ram home the advantage and take as many of these countries into the orbit of the West as possible. We've covered this on the show before. I know, John, you have a slightly different take on things.
I do have a different take on this. And first of all,
let's not go.
You say the orbit. I was looking at the map of this yesterday, and of course there's NATO members, obviously. Then there's something like a partnership status, an observer status, not in NATO, but kind of associated and affiliated somehow. Even Russia has some kind of, I forgot the exact term they use, but Russia has some kind of status within NATO. And same question I have for the European Union, applies to NATO. When everybody's in the club, what does it mean to be in the club?
Well, that's the point that the Russians always make. What's the point of NATO? We're not going to do anything. But yet they still have this massive military with a huge amount of nuclear weapons pointing at every major capital in the world. Okay, now you can kind of turn around and say, well, maybe NATO's an oxymoron. We don't need it anymore. Let's get rid of it. Russia, by the way, the plan was, and would have been a good plan, was to bring Russia in when Putin was talking about becoming an associate member in the late 90s. The West missed the trick of bringing Russia into the club. And if you had have eventually made that work, then you could have talked about getting rid of NATO. But let's be real about it. The threat to NATO is Russia.
Yeah, can I remind everybody that NATO's foe, the Warsaw Pact, was dissolved in 1991? So it's an awkward question to bring up, but it's totally relevant and important and valid. Here we are in 2019, 28 years later. Why does NATO exist? What does it do? What is it for?
It's a pact. You banded together and said, if anyone attacks us, you attack us all. It doesn't necessarily have to have an enemy, John. It's just a warning to anyone out there.
It's an alignment of democratic interests, isn't it? So,
Turkey's like in the club. Oh, really?
Well, democratic is a
democratic-ish.
Is a very elastic term.
Yeah,
Turkey's a massively important regional partner. It might not be perfect. Erdogan has certainly brought that country backwards in the last 15 years. But John, you do need a partner in the Middle East, and Turkey is about as good as it gets. So
Turkey constantly is a thorn on our side.
Geopolitics,
refusing the use of airspace, refusing cooperation.
John. It's about making hard decisions. It's about choosing. It's about seeing what the world actually is, what the military threats are, where the geopolitical choke points are, and actually engaging with it in a realistic way.
And not always picking on Malaysian Airlines.
Okay, fair enough. But I think, as an American, I think it's fair for me to ask, why are we in an alliance where Estonia, for example, or I don't know, let's say it was Estonia, if they want to pick a fight with Russia, suddenly that becomes America's fight.
No, excuse me. The organization is set up to defend if it's attacked. And an attack on one is an attack on all.
Yeah,
it doesn't launch offensive actions.
No. Estonia starts picking at the Russian bear. The Russian bear responds, and then suddenly that's America's fight.
Come up with as many ridiculous hypotheticals as you like. But Estonia is not going to attack Russia. What the fuck are you talking about?
Estonia launches an overland.
First of all, I said it was
a good idea for an Icelandic drama.
I said it was an example. But why is America committed to committing? Why is America committed to defend and fight with other countries over which it has no influence with it over their foreign policy decisions?
One word: history. That's why, John.
What?
History.
Yeah, history in 1947. In 1948, maybe. Okay, it was valid through the Cold War. Okay, but for the last 20 years, NATO has been drifting. It has no real purpose.
Have you not consulted the Estonian diaspora?
Can we really count on, I don't know, sorry, no offense, Belgium or Portugal to sacrifice
I know you don't care about Russia's invasions of Georgia and the Ukraine, and you consider that completely someone else's problem.
It's Europe's problem.
Yeah, I know, fair enough. But that's the type of action that NATO was set up to safeguard against. If they had been NATO members, that never would have happened.
Well, as I said before, the European Union, as rich as it is, as populous as it is, with 2 nuclear powers, I don't know why you need to drag in the United States into this.
It's a point you've made repeatedly.
Yeah, I know. I'll make it again. Getting off topic here. Let's continue with Polish news, actually specifically in Warsaw. This became a big issue in the last week. The mayor of Warsaw, what was his name again? Rafał Trzaskowski? I don't know if I'm saying that right. Rafał Trzaskowski. He signed the declaration of support for the LGBT community. Kind of harmless, kind of a symbolic thing. Kind of affirming that their right to equal treatment under the law, and committing, I think, a symbolic amount of money to setting up some resources for them to, a support network essentially in Warsaw, some government help for people in the LGBT community that need some kind of I'm not exactly sure what kind of help that. What form that help was
I didn't really catch the details on this one, but am I right?
Well, it was very vague in general. Like, we support you, and that's it. Basically.
Am I right in assuming that this then launched some kind of avalanche of response from PiS and their right-wing supporters?
Well, it did. Not only
claiming that liberal elites are undermining the moral fabric
PiS as a
of Poland.
party generally, their position was, look at what the liberals, look what PO is doing. Look at what they're forcing on our children. But someone within kind of a loose cannon in the Law and Justice Party made some inflammatory remarks about how the platform Obywatelska was promoting this radical leftist homosexual agenda. And it became kind of red meat for both sides of the political divide. The mayor of Warsaw is appealing to his base, kind of affirming support for certain causes that are favored among the center left, and PiS is appealing to their base, affirming their opposition. Seems like retail politics on both sides.
I feel like we should have a bell when this happens, when myself and yourself are in complete agreement. Yes, I couldn't agree with that summation anymore.
Right, yeah. I shall try and search out a bell sound effect. Probably not, maybe not for this episode, but for future ones. And by the way, when you talk about the right, you mean the extreme right, don't you?
Oh yeah, whatever way you want to tag it. Yeah. I get lost in it all.
Yeah.
This is one of those subjects where there's really not. I don't have an opinion on it, but it's just very big news. It's in the headlines every every day. It'll be replaced by something else next week, I'm sure.
Load of BS. We try and focus on the stories that we think actually matter, and very much this is one of them.
But sometimes there just isn't that much in the way of stories, so we have to try and.
It is another example of how
the culture wars,
along with what's his name from the Viosna party, the new guy, Biedron, about how LGBT issues and openly gay politicians are kind of in the conversation in a way that simply didn't exist even a few years ago. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
When we had closeted homosexual politicians.
I'm looking forward to the day when kind of artificial intelligence politicians are, to be treated the same as human beings.
It could be a big improvement, let's be honest about it.
Or indeed actually treat politicians as human beings, but maybe that's just a bit too much of a stretch.
I'll give it a few more years. We'll get to it eventually one day. Oh, something I thought we were going to open the show with this. Totally my fault. Sorry, Dave.
Friday.
Last week, this is something we should have mentioned in the show last week, actually. Last week on Friday was International Women's Day.
Yeah, go women.
Now, this is not a controversial subject, or is it?
I don't think it's controversial. I think the Poles do Women's Day in a nice way. It's all about gallantry and affection. However, let's be real about it. It's a communist holiday. It's not a bullshit.
What do you exactly mean by women, John, though, these days?
People who identify as women. Oh, it gets complicated now.
Yeah, let's just leave it there. In the office...
It's all right. We're not posting on Krakow Expats anymore anyways.
In the office, you're talking about a collection for flowers. So every woman in the office can be given a flower, which is quite expensive because our company's about 75% women. Yeah, no, look, I've no problem with it, but it's not something I get on board with. As I'm always saying to all my Polish friends, you just have a bloody day for everything in this country. We need to thin out the amount of days where people need to remember things.
Ginger Left Hand Day. I'm voting strongly for that one.
I'd never heard of
it.
I had never.
Yeah.
How were you not put down when you were young?
Oh, terribly.
2 strikes against you, huh?
Yeah.
You wouldn't have got away with that in Catholic Ireland. Left-handedness was the devil's work.
Victimhood. Yeah.
I'd never heard of International Women's Day before I moved to Poland.
Nobody had it.
Is this an Irish thing too, Dave?
No, although it's catching on in Ireland. I think now, because we're all so global these days.
In the age of Facebook.
The rest of the world picks up on these days and they think, well, maybe we could have a bit of that, but there's definitely no tradition of
What about in the UK, Josh?
I'd never heard of it until I came to
You hear it mentioned on the news now. I don't think anyone actually engages with it on the ground in Ireland.
Yeah, the BBC probably picks that one up gladly.
I think, Dave, you mentioned your office was distributing flowers to all the women. I think that's kind of an obligation that every employer feels these days. They have to do it.
Well, we didn't. We had a collection where we were asked.
Well, you had to pay for it.
Well, I may or may not have remembered to, and they're kind of ugly flowers. I don't mind saying that. Nobody listens to the show and work.
Actually, I have to give a big shout out to the company that I work for from time to time, because they handed out Spa Day vouchers to all the female employees, and then in what I thought was a particularly profound gesture to the modern era of equality said that, well, of course, it wouldn't be fair for only the women to get these, so we also, all the guys got Spa Day vouchers.
When are you going to exfoliate, Josh?
Yes, this question everybody wants to. It's Hotel Starry, actually.
No, I meant which Orify.
Orify. That is not a plural.
It isn't, no. But I like putting it on.
Just confused everybody.
Words there.
It's like orifice politics,
Good one, Josh.
Yeah, good one, Josh. Anyway, Women's Day last week. Sorry, ladies, we forgot about it last week, but
because we genuinely don't care.
But we're catching up on it. So isn't Man's Day the day after that?
Oh, give me a break.
So that was yesterday.
Sure it was yesterday.
Okay.
Nobody cares.
I can almost hear my mother shouting every.
No. I had
the obvious.
I
joke
had a
to make
celebratory pint.
Yeah. Did somebody else pay for it? Because if you paid for your own, where's the recognition and admiration in that?
Also, doesn't it cheapen Mother's Day a little bit? We're just celebrating the fact that you happen to have a gender.
Well, no, I think the point is that it's discriminating against all those women who aren't mothers.
Right.
Ooh,
okay.
Can't have that.
No.
We're getting in deep waters here, John. Swim.
We got Mother's and Father's Day, obviously. We have Grandparents' Day in this country.
Yeah.
As well.
Never heard of that till I came to Poland.
Yeah,
Great Nephew's Day.
Neither had I.
Second Cousin's Day.
Ex-Neighbour's Day.
In Slonsk, maybe.
Everyone has their own day. The name day. We got to do a thing on name days once to explain that to people.
Name days?
Feature on name days. That
is still a thing among some people, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, now all the trams, they flag up what name day it is, don't you? When you're sitting on there, they have.
Yeah, that's right. They do.
A lot of our listeners, I bet, right now, having a Scooby-Doo. What we're on about?
Yeah, name day is. We'll cover it some other time. But there's Every name has a day. Actually, it's 3 days over the course of the year. You can choose which one you want to celebrate.
Every name has its day.
It's really complicated. Let's move on. Let's talk about some science, guys. We don't have enough science on the show. Science, yes.
We talk about science.
This was in the news a few days ago. Not big news, but we found it interesting. Solar power. Now, when you think solar power, most people don't think Poland, let's be honest. But in fact, things are moving here. The numbers are impressive in terms of year-on-year growth. Of course, their overall numbers are still low, but they're growing. The number of people who are using solar power in their homes and offices and different buildings every year up. And the Polish Minister of Entrepreneurship and Technology, yes, there is one, Entrepreneurship and Technology, it's a woman, she says that she wants to maybe alter the tax code to provide incentives for more people to install this technology and to use the technology. There are some Polish researchers behind some interesting developments in the world of solar panels and solar electricity. And then on the financial end of things, some banks and some venture capitalists are also making some moves to kind of fund some projects that could turn into some commercially viable solar energy businesses. So let's put this together and kind of recognize the fact that Poland is a player to some extent in the solar energy market. Dave, Josh,
I'd like to start by
how do you see this turning out?
I'd like to start, you're right, there's a few different things to parse out here. So I think we should start with Josh explaining the traditional economic idea behind redistributing power from individual solar panels into the grid and the issues with that.
Yes. Now, this is something that's been around for more than a decade, maybe a couple of decades now. The idea that if you have solar panels on the roof of your house, not only are you able, when the sun is shining, to generate electricity to reduce your personal consumption from the grid, there can even be occasions when the sun is shining so brightly and you're using so little electricity that you're actually able to feed back this surplus electricity into the grid and get credits on your electricity bill as a consequence. Now, on the first part of this, the idea that when the sun is shining, you spend less in terms of drawing electricity from the grid is absolutely valid. Basically, it's just like having less stuff switched on because the electricity that you are using, the first port of call is what's coming in from your solar cells, and then, the remainder that you need is topped up by what you pull from the grid. But the reverse part of this idea of feeding into the grid, is vastly more complicated and actually creates enormous headaches for grid planning engineers, which is an incredibly complex subject and one which, a lot of people who have an interest in what goes on in terms of energy and the environment.
So simplify the shit out of it.
Well, yeah, you'd think it's just not like turning on a tap and water coming out. And,
so is one of the issues ramping down, like say you've got a lot of sun, a lot of panels start putting energy into the grid. There's nowhere to actually store it. The only way to do is to ramp down the other power stations. Is there an issue with that?
There is. I mean, it's kind of because power stations are not things that you can just like start up and switch off, like turning the key on a car or something like that. Like a nuclear power station takes a while to get up to steam, literally, and down again.
Nuclear plant joke for you all you nuclear engineers out there.
And actually it's true of all nuclear plants, and the ones that can start up quickest are the ones that are also the most expensive to run. That's kind of,
Let me ask the obvious question here. Okay, for 10 or 12 weeks in the summertime, okay, great. Let's say it all works just fine technically and we get all the power that we need. In Poland, what do we do for the rest of the year when we have gray, overcast skies and 6 hours of kind of sort of sunlight during the day?
Well, it's only part of a strategy. You'll never, you'll always need power plants, but the exciting thing about solar compared to other renewables is the integration aspect, that you could literally start replacing windows, roof tiles, and, this is just, it's low-hanging fruit in terms of the renewable picture. But obviously I don't think that they could ever fully replace.
What about the cost of installation?
Well, I think, look, this has to be...
all the time.
This has to be looked at in from a similar perspective to something like loft insulation or double glazing or whatever. You have double glazed windows, you have insulation in your loft, you reduce the amount of heat leaking out of your building, therefore your heating bills are lower. Having more double glazing or more loft insulation does not reduce your heating bills even more. There is a theoretical limit. Now, if you have a solar panel on your roof, or with this miraculous material, possibly even your entire building coated with something that can draw solar energy, you're going to reduce your electricity bill. You're not going to be feeding into the grid and actually earning money from it. This is a complete chimera. but you will reduce your electricity bill. So the question is the cost of this technology in relation to the savings that you're likely to have on your energy bills.
I can see John's forehead getting a little confused here. It's creasing up a little bit.
Wrinkled.
Yeah, let me just say something. Back in 2009, Japanese researchers invented an entirely new type of solar panel. It's one of the most exciting technologies in the world. It's called perovskite.
It's called what?
Perovskite. I have no idea how to pronounce
fire their marketing team immediately.
Skeety or something. But anyway, basically, this is complicated. But if it works the way they expect it to work, you can spray this and paint it onto virtually any surface. It's a total game changer. It doesn't depend on silicon. It uses a hybrid organic, inorganic lead or tin halide based material as the light harvesting active layer. Got all that?
So it would make
Absolutely.
it would make it easier to retrofit any building.
It could be amazing. And
you could even spray the top of your head, John, and get a charge your iPhone.
That's a lot of real
I'm
estate.
a Samsung guy. So there.
But yeah, there's also now I'm not exactly clear on what it is she invented, but this Polish scientist called Olga Malinkiewicz, studying in the University of Valencia. Yes, I get it. Valencia is sunnier than Poland.
I don't know how you transfer that technology from
winding
Spain
that comment
to
up
here.
the minute it comes out of my mouth. They've signed an exclusive deal with Skanska. And supposedly they're going to be using this tech, integrated it into absolutely brand new buildings. And maybe it will be expensive and slightly inefficient at the start, but I think we can all agree it's a pretty exciting development that we might be able to spray solar panels on a wall soon. Like, I mean, that really could help, energy.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here for just a second.
Go ahead, John.
This is exactly the kind of story that plays well in the media. You know, the technology of the future and cheap energy and clean energy, just like we often hear now about recycling. And a couple of months ago at the climate conference in Katowice, the future is going to be clean and cheap, and we're going to have all the power we need. And then we get to the future, we get the 3-5 years down the road, and suddenly it's another 3 or 5 years past that. And it keeps tech journalists busy. It's nice to think about. But here on the ground, we don't see that many changes implemented.
Do you remember, like about 3 years ago, there was this miracle road surface that was like a giant solar cell that kind of... It was a road surface
that tested, and it's been proved that it doesn't work right. There's too much shade on a road anyway. It was a mad idea. But.
And it cost like $1 million per 10 meters or something like that.
Just to say that's a perfect example of what I'm going to say is that, yeah, you're right, that turned out to be bad tech, but there was big money invested in that. It was worth talking about at the time, because if it had worked, it would have been cool. And what you're saying is totally true, John. Of course, if you have 100 tech stories about a wonder tech, only 5, 6, 7 of them are going to shake out. But this one seems to have momentum behind it. It seems to have the right amount of research dollars. And when I see a company like Skanska saying they're going to integrate it into an actual project, that makes me a bit excited.
Yeah, if it gets their attention, there must be somebody who knows what they're talking about, who's given it the green light.
But I'd like to indulge in a little cynicism, though, which I know you enjoy, John.
Oh, it's my favorite.
Polski Solar's 10 megawatt site near Jelena Góra. Now, I have a huge issue with this type of solar strategy. This site is going to cover 22 hectares and have 30,000 solar panels.
Wow.
I just think we have to look at nuclear as the second plank in this whole strategy. Forget bloody wind. What about visual pollution? I've never seen anything uglier than a wind turbine on a coastal, a stunning coast. Like the coast of Portugal is blighted by them. I mean, I've gone off on a bit of a tangent here, and I've the same issue with solar relay farms. They're too big. On what planet could you say, I've got a new type of coal-fired power plant. It covers 28 miles. Can we put it in your backyard? No, yeah, no problem. They have to be clean solar panels as well. There are issues here. You're basically, whatever site hosts 30 hectares of solar panels will never be anything but a horrible big eyesore.
Plus, you've got to employ loads of people without high school certificates to go around with squeegees to clean the glass every 6 months, because otherwise they just don't work.
A really big squeegee.
I did actually say that.
Oh. Yeah, they are ugly. You mentioned the wind farms, which you're right, it is a tangent, but yeah, you see, I've seen them from the,
they're hideous.
You see them driving all day. There's a lot of them in the east of Poland. You see them off the coast. You see them from airplanes sometimes.
And they're not getting more efficient.
And they're awful. They're ugly.
They're getting bigger.
And don't they, Josh, you know something about this. The energy they generate, when it's transmitted to the grid, there's a massive loss from
yeah,
the point of the wind farm to the grid.
Yeah, it's like less than 50% efficiency.
Denmark's offshore wind farms, which are feted by environmentalists all around the world, most ironically have been proved to be literally a genocide on seabirds. So the environmentalists can't have it both ways. Either get behind a tech that really, genuinely never hurts anybody, nuclear, or else, stop promoting these animal killers. Was that emotive enough?
No, yeah.
How do I segue from that? Animal killers. My God.
No, it just pisses me off. All ideas weren't invented equally. We need to get real on the strategies about renewables. There'll never be an all renewable solution. It's an absolute nonsense, it is. But that's why I like to give solar its due. Solar does have massive potential, if you ask me, especially if we can get away from photovoltaic and into something more.
These alternative energies, they get attention, they get government backing, they get financial backing because it's kind of the right answer, so to speak, for today's problems. They're the green solution, so it's the good solution. Coal is bad, coal is dirty, but coal works, and that's why we keep using it. It's cheap, that's why we keep using it.
It's like our other bet noir on this show, recycling. Recycling, sure, makes sense. Recycle aluminium, recycle certain types of trash, but this nonsense of separating now everything at home, and then it all ends up in a landfill. And what's bloody wrong with landfills anyway? This has never been answered sufficiently. What the hell is wrong with a landfill?
One of the joys
end up as parks.
One of the joys about plastic to really kind of like rub people up the wrong way is that waste plastic can be compressed incredibly small. P.J. O'Rourke wrote about this like 30 years ago, kind of that like the United Kingdom, a population of 65 million people, 1 year's output of plastic waste can be compressed into an area of like half a cubic kilometre or something. It's minuscule.
If you read John Tierney's seminal piece about recycling from, I think, the late 90s, he calculates that if America landfilled all of its garbage for the next 1,000 years, the site would cover 35 miles, which within 10 years of finishing it would be grass anyway.
Let's send it all to New Jersey.
Yeah, well, look,
that's already there, I think.
That's the thing, isn't it? That barge that got couldn't land its trash anywhere. It starts this panic, and all of a sudden, every municipality in the country starts to spend $200 to $300 per ton on getting rid of waste that can't be anything done with it. And of course, what happened straight away? People just started opening landfills in places where they'd load of land, and the price of landfilling went through the floor. It's stupid to landfill in New York City because it's just a tiny island. Have you ever seen Manhattan? There's no space for a dump, but America's a huge country.
Is that the last word on solar energy policy in Poland?
I hope so.
We're all over the place. We've literally nothing to talk about. There is no news.
It's been a light week. It's been a light week. Which will be further proven by our next subject.
Which is?
We're giving our theories some air.
Yeah.
The guy's making fun of me for this before we started recording. I don't know why, but it's March, so that means
you're obsessed.
We get a lot of statistics. Listen, we get a lot of statistics in March because 2 months, January, February, is enough to process the previous calendar year's events. And the Polish statistical offices in the last week of February, first week of March, announced a lot of stats for the previous year. And this is an example of that. The most often given names for babies all over the country and for each województwo, the region, district, Małopolska. So we have the most common, most popular names, I guess we could say.
Are we allowed to have a guess?
Well, So the most popular names given to boys and girls, I think this is Małopolska 2018. I got the top 3 for boys and girls. What do you think they were?
No pauses, by the way. That's the rule when you do quizzes on a radio show, Josh. No pausing, pausing. Answer.
Go.
Gerald.
Just missed the top 3.
Piotr?
No.
Adam?
I guess we're doing boys then first. Okay, no.
Just tell us, because it's going to be pauses. So.
Yeah.
Third place, Shimon.
Okay.
Simon. Second place, Anthony, which is surprising to me.
Yeah, you don't meet that many Anthonys.
And first place,
they're not grown up yet.
This is for like the 12th or 13th year in a row. Enough, people, enough. Jakub.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's got a stranglehold on the top spot. I don't know why.
No.
I don't know why. It's a great name. Okay, fine, but
Preoccupation with Cuba, isn't it?
you go
Castro.
to any preschool these days, and half the boys are named Kuba. It's a little bit much. Okay,
You are a bit obsessed with this topic, and the reason we
like
say
this topic.
the reason me and Josh started laughing when you brought it up is we played your pub quizzes for many years.
Yeah,
And this was literally your most favorite question, wasn't it?
Every March the stats came out, so every March you had the question. What about girls? Did we forget about the ladies? This is just days after International Women's Day, and we're not going to talk about the girls' names?
Okay, most popular, I don't know.
Willow.
Also just missed out. Third place, Maya, which was a surprise to me because that was really big 10 years ago, but it's coming
Nice
back.
name.
Second place, Susanna.
Yeah, Zeus was a nice one.
Courtney.
And first place, again, for like the 9th or 10th year in a row, Yulia.
I want to see more Boguslavs, more of these old school names, bring them back.
Don't hold your breath.
Arkadiusz,
Don't hold your breath. Arkadiusz, yes. What do you think about, on the subject of Polish names,
Przemysław.
I've always thought it's pretty stable. The same names we see today, the same names from 50 years ago, 100 years ago.
I can almost feel people turning their laptops off right now.
What about, are you in favor of kind of mixing it up a little bit, or you want to stick with the classics and stick with what works?
Well, I think there's definitely an element of the Catholic naming, wouldn't you say, like the most popular names are all?
Sure, yeah. I think it's a lot better than pulling names out of a mail order catalogue, which seems to be the...
Yeah, in Ireland there's a huge trend towards, Irish names, and it's getting kind of confusing now. Like, there's a lot of new Irish names that I'll see them, and I'm not even sure how to pronounce it anymore, Those
ones with spellings that have zero relationship to how it's pronounced.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, like there's certain ones which are considered classic Irish names, which you've always seen a lot of.
Can you spell, on the subject, the Siobhan is a popular girl's name, women's name. Can you spell Siobhan for us?
Siobhain. I-fada-N, sorry. Fada's like an accent.
There was a B in there somewhere?
Yes, Bhain.
What sound does the B make in Irish?
Siobhan.
I didn't hear a B.
No, neither did I. It's mad. It's a hard language. That's why no one speaks it.
What about Kaelin? Isn't there Kaelin a name as well? For guys?
You see, I'm getting a bit of a sweat. That Kaelin?
Kaelin. Isn't that Kaelin?
Kaelin.
When I see
Killian, maybe?
It's like, how?
Cillian.
Is there a C-A?
And would you like to know something even funnier to make it even worse? Because Irish had 4 dialects, there's actually different spellings of a lot of these names as well.
Even
so
better.
It's not even like we have a standardised guide to it.
What do you think about old school English names? Theodore, Frederick.
I think you're obsessed with names, dude. Is it because you're called John Adkins?
Well, John is. It's not. Okay, it's not exciting. But it's kind of straight down the middle. But okay.
My name is Dave, and what you guess what my middle name is? John, which at the time, and I checked this in the 80s, before people were counting like the Middle East and China and stuff, back when it was, when the most popular thing in the world meant, English speaking countries, Dave and John were the 2 most popular names in the world. So literally my man got the joke, the name book out and went, we'll have 1 and 2, please.
I did actually. My parents' names are Jeffrey and Shirley, and I discovered as I was growing up that such an enormous percentage of people of approximately my age whose parents were born in the same years as my parents had the names Jeffrey and Shirley. And Shirley was particularly popular with women because Shirley Temple was a big movie star.
It's definitely the least interesting chat we've ever had.
Well, it is, and I can get even more boring on this subject.
Well, we should conclude by saying that, Josh, what the fuck is up with your name? Because you're actually called Jonathan, but your nickname is Josh, and then everyone ends up occasionally slipping in a Joshua, and that's completely
hiding
incorrect.
from the law, maybe.
No. No, but I think the Joshua comes just because people think that Josh is short for Joshua, which is a reasonable thing.
On that pathetic note, we're going to bring things to a close. That's the news this week. Solar power and Women's Day. That was last week, actually. Warsaw Mayor, NATO. What else was in there?
St. Patrick's Day is coming up.
Oh, St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick's Day. Do you celebrate St. Patrick's Day?
And we're going to have an exclusive interview with...
But do you celebrate it? I mean... Apart from drinking,
will you stop interrupting me?
But you interrupted me first. I asked a question first. So do you reflect on your Irishness? And I don't know.
When I was growing up, the St. Patrick's Day was nothing. Man, you had this poxy parade in Tallow. There's a security company sponsored all the floats. I mean, every float was ACT security. And one year I marched in that thing 6 miles for the Tallow Echo, the paper I used to sell, the local paper.
6 miles.
And then there was a big scandal because 5 of the paper delivery bags went missing at the end of the route. And that meant 25 quid on petty cash had to be spent. We were all dragged around to the house, to the office to listen.
I think I remember reading about that.
Yeah, in the local paper, yeah.
6 miles?
I don't know. I just made up the distance. Okay, but it felt like a lot for me at the time. Walking around windy, rainy Tala, just walking around the housing estate.
You're saying it's a bigger deal now?
Are you joking me? Right, okay, so here's what happened, yeah? We realised you were having all this crack over in America, and we were like, fuck that, we've a few quid now, we're going to throw a few decent parties. We're going to turn it into St. Patrick's Week. Yeah, man.
So you're telling me that Ireland, just like Halloween and Valentine's Day, you imported St. Patrick's Day from America?
Yeah, pretty much, man. And we invented Halloween as well, Samhain. It comes from Irish pagan culture.
Yeah, you did.
It's pathetic, really is. I mean, all Irish people have a story about their uncle telling them, in the 80s, about these amazing parades in Chicago, and of course you'd see it on the front page of the newspaper. We used to have a proper parade in the centre of the city. Don't get me wrong. I mean, there was celebrations back in the 80s.
All right, for anybody still listening, for both of you, we're going to cut this. We're going to mercifully bring this to an end. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to check out our sponsors, bigdoor24.pl, if you're looking for anything related to real estate, buying, selling, renting, help with a mortgage application. bigdoor24.pl/KrakCast for a special cashback offer. Thanks for sharing on Facebook. Tell a friend. Spread the word about the KrakCast. Dave has one more thing he wants to say.
I'd just like to say, as before I was rudely interrupted, that we have a guest also. We'll have a feature interview this week about the whole Enterprise Ireland Polish-Irish business relationship. We'll be featuring Bartek Szypracki from EI, who's based in Warsaw. So
you got to work on your Polish surname pronunciation, Dave. It's really weak.
Szypracki?
I'm guessing that's not right. I don't know. I don't know. Oh, no, you want me to look at it? It's Bartek Szypracki.
Asshole.
All right, you got it. That's it for this time. See you next time on the KrakCast News.